Well, we'll start the podcast with bonus news.
Bonus news on the podcast.
This is from Dave Nosey Parker's column.
So it must be
in
true.
League Weekly. Luke trains Furies, the headline. Former Rugby League star Luke Menzies was the man responsible for showing heavyweight boxer Tyson Fury the ropes for his wrestling debut last Thursday night. The former Salford and Toronto forward, who performs for WWE under the ring name Ridge Holland, showed Fury some Yorkshire grit. I mean, is anyone from Yorkshire called Ridge? No.
Or Menzies.
Showed him some Yorkshire grit ahead of his fight with Braun Strowman, not his real name, in Saudi Arabia. Fury was reported to have scooped a cool £9 million.
Did he win?
He did, but it is professional wrestling.
Did we know that before it started?
The results may be predetermined. The fascinating thing is, if I had trained Tyson Fury, having watched the fight, because it was terrible, I wouldn't be letting it known that I'd trained him, because he wasn't very good. But he did earn £9 million, so...
Who are we?
£9 million.
Apparently. It's all paid by the people at the Saudi Arabian government, who were desperate for these things.
Wow.
Oh, hang on. Let me... why is that doing that?
No, Joe. No messing about.
We are live
Well,
on...
I'm sure we might mention Bradford.
We're live on YouTube. We are going to talk about Bradford and many and various things. Just trying to get Facebook.
We might even talk about Great Britain.
Yeah, and Tonga.
And Wayne Bennett. And selections.
Yep. It's all topical, my friend.
We might even talk about your career. We might even introduce you.
It's all about the Facebook.
Well, I think we've broken Facebook at the moment, which is slightly concerning, but people are already watching on YouTube, which is...
Well, hello YouTube. Good evening YouTube. And you will have noticed on YouTube who our guest is this evening. I would say, doesn't need introduction, but I keep getting pulled up for not introducing the guest. One of the great players of his generation. I know he won't agree with that because he's too modest. But Grand Final winner, Challenge Cup Final winner, so can't be disputed.
No.
Played over here, played in Australia.
You're very kind.
Also been the other side of the fence, on the commercial side at Warrington. Currently made a business decision to come out of Rugby League to go on to bigger and better things in industry, which I'm sure we'll compare the two.
Yep.
Richard Mathers, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause.
Good evening, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. And the format of these shows over the last 2 or 3 weeks is that it's your time. We want to get the best out of you, because the idea of having a guest for 2 hours is we can talk about stuff that ranges slightly beyond who's played well and who hasn't. Yep. So whilst we do need to talk about the international fixtures this weekend, hopefully we'll get the chance to get your thoughts on a whole range of things.
Looking forward to it, my friend.
What do we want to start with then? Should we start with Great Britain? Because we gave it short shrift last week and we got told off for this. But I was able to stay up having finished work at 2 a.m. and thought, well, I'll stay up and I'll watch the game, that'll be good.
The trouble with social media these days is if you don't watch something live, there's no chance of avoiding.
Unless you delete your apps.
And the other thing is, I wanted to watch Tonga in Australia, and I thought, as soon as I start watching that and then go back, he'll go, and we've already seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got up at 4 in the morning as well.
You're both better men than me.
Well, I mean, you say that, but you might have made the right decision. And hindsight tells us you probably did. Great Britain losing.
The question is, without obviously wishing to pander to anything, were they as bad as the press that they've got?
Well, I watched it back, so I didn't watch it live, but I did watch it. I kind of agree with a lot of what Wayne Bennett said in that it was boring for the first part. I thought it was edgy. I don't think the halves played particularly well. So yeah, it wasn't a great game. I must admit, I'm slightly disappointed in both performances. I think with the Great Britain brand coming back, and I sort of remember it from my youth, but then also more recently from sort of 2007, and when I was at Leeds, when it was that was a pinnacle to then come through and play for Great Britain, and it seemed a lot bigger than it is now. And I thought,
is that because we're not playing Australia?
Maybe. But for some reason, maybe, I think, I don't know if you already touched on any previous shows, my personal opinion, I don't think it's been diluted with this selection of 3 Australians. But that doesn't take away the performance element. But I thought the opportunity there to really rebrand and relaunch the Great Britain Lions it's not been as big a success, and I think they need to win this week, or it could be.
Is that partly because we don't know when they're going to be playing again? Nominally, we've got an idea when they'll be playing.
Yeah, I think if it was a clear strategy, whether it be every 2 years, or we're going to play obviously the World Cup's in 2 years, or it's every 4, and plan it that far in advance. I'm sure there's a World Cup Council, International Council there. It would be nice to know the format of the Great Britain Lions. I understand the home nations, and obviously we've got the fabulous World Cup coming up in this country in 2021, but I don't see why we can't go to every 4 years, a la sort of the British Lions in Rugby Union. I think it would be, whether it be an Oceania tour or a 3-test tour against Australia, or whichever way you wanted to do it, both down in Australia or on these shows. Because I think look back to the sort of the early 2000s when we had the 3 tests against Australia. They were some of the best.
2003, when we lost every game 6 minutes from time.
And we played at the D-Do at Wigan, Huddersfield, and I remember going I was playing in the first team there, and I remember them being amazing tests. Stadiums were round, and you look at the
really competitive
matches. Fire, everything you'd associate with it being the pinnacle of the game. I haven't seen any of the intensity, any of the aggression, any of the.
It's interesting that you mentioned both games, because I think we can slightly reevaluate the Tonga game on what they've done this week. Mm-hmm. And I think what was missed last week, and we sort of touched on it with Danica when she was here, was that Tonga didn't get the credit they deserve for what they're doing at the moment. And I think this week to then back that up and beat Australia says, actually, that it's disappointing to lose, but we lost to a magical try and there wasn't a lot between the teams.
100%.
I think the other thing about International Rugby League is you don't get many chances. And whereas Tonga took theirs, we had 2 towards the end of a game where we'd attritionally worn down New Zealand and didn't take either of them, which is not to blame, solely point the finger of blame at the people that didn't score the tries, but you ain't going to get that many opportunities.
Not at that level.
And again, I think it comes back to the intensity of our domestic competition, that it's too long, and we don't play enough games where you're only going to get a limited number of chances and you've got to take them. So we fashioned 2 tries both down the right-hand side, or 2 try-scoring opportunities. If we'd have taken either of those, even if we'd have scraped a draw or possibly won by a conversion, would people still be saying it's as disappointing a performance as it was? Isn't that how International Rugby League works, that for 60 minutes you do wear down the opposition?
Absolutely, and I think that's where you look at the great Australian sides who were sort of your standard bearers of exactly that game. It would be very nip and tuck, and it was just a war of attrition until whoever cracked first, and they always seem to be the pippers at the really late or
and they used to put that down to state of origin, because at that time it was building up to.
And like you mentioned about the short series and fresher players, but that's another subject. But it all goes back into that, and I think Test match rugby should be that, and it comes down to the last 20 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever. And if you lose by a couple of points, either way, that's the pinnacle, because it's so intense, and the best are against the best, so you can't expect to win every single game, but it should be at that level for 80 minutes.
I thought as well, would never say in front of an ex-professional player what I thought tactically, but I just think we waited too long to bring Darryl Clark on, which again is not necessarily a criticism of Josh Hodgson, but he looks like somebody that's played a lot of rugby this year. When Clark came on, Jackson Hastings then started to take a little bit more responsibility, and the game opened up a little bit. I don't know whether, if you had a criticism of Wayne Bennett, and we should talk about your reservations about who we selected, but did we just wait too long to change the way we played?
Yeah, I think so, and I think either hooker, I think you're sort of wasting an interchange having a hooker on the bench at that level, because both hookers play 80 minutes week in, week out. Darryl Clark has done for Warrington, and he's been awesome this year. As good a season as he's had, as has Josh Hodgson. But I think you, especially against the Kiwis or international rugby, Tongans are massive, Kiwis are massive. You're probably better not playing one of them and having an extra forward on the bench for size, and then just starting one for 80 minutes, because they can both play 80 minutes at that level. I think the thing with Daz is the two very different, because I can see why Wayne would pick Josh to get him around the park and sort of carry out the great game plan. Daz can do that, but he's not as natural as that. Whereas, you know, as you saw, any spark or any running opportunity is off. But then also what that does is bring the players on, so they're on their front foot, and he speeds up play, especially when they're tiring. But you know, he can do that for 80 minutes.
And the rucks were very slow.
Yeah, and that all it takes is one opportunity for Darryl Clark to go quick, and it changes the set. So it can go from a mediocre set from receiving the ball and under a load of pressure, and it needs to get half quick play the ball. But more the point, I think, don't have both of them, because it's a very, especially with the limited interchange as well. Go for size on the bench. Have 4 forwards or Jack Hughes, 4 big front rowers. For example, Jack Hughes can play centre or second row, and play one or the other. Would be
pointed out by Ken. He says Liam Watts should be in the squad. The best thing that could ever happen to Liam Watts in his international career is not being involved at the moment, because his stock goes high. It's like Graham Onions playing cricket for England. He didn't play for England, and he's the best bowler out there because he wasn't playing. A few people are looking at the selection for next week. Obviously, no Ryan Hall now. Looks like Zach Hardacre, possibly the best fullback in the competition last year. He's not going to play at fullback. He's going to play on the wing. In the centres, says Andy. Why not put Blake Austin? He says all the best centres were quality halfbacks: Jonathan Davis, Jamie Lyon, Yestin Harris, Gary Schofield. Fair point. Robin says it's a good shout. We went on tour with 6 halfbacks and 2 wingers, and now we've got 1 winger. And the question is here, and I mentioned this on the Ferg on the Freak podcast this morning. Wayne Bennett's the coach. We know that. We know he's got the cognoscenti around him. He's the one who picks this squad. He's picked Ryan Hall, who's hardly played this year. And I'm not saying
which could have been an advantage, because he could have been fresh.
I'm not saying Ryan Hall's not a great player, or hasn't been. You know, I'm talking about current
well,
situation.
he got his 40th cap this week, and
that's
just astonishing.
Considering how little the international game, how many games they play, so it's a great achievement.
So we've now got Jermaine McGilvery, Zach Hardacre,
but I think
possibly.
it'd be interesting, obviously, to get your thoughts. But I think we had this debate when the squad was selected. There wasn't a lot of dispute as to who'd been left out. I think Liam Watts is the obvious one. Probably Stephen Ratchford could feel a bit unlucky that he hadn't been included, because he's got utility value as well.
Absolutely, in the touring squad.
And played really well this year, even when Warrington were fading out towards the end of the season. His standard never seemed to drop. But apart from that, we didn't come up with 100 other people. And isn't that the issue as much as criticising Wayne Bennett for who was selected? Who else is there out there? We've got some good young kids coming through. We saw that in the England Knights. Jake Truman's getting experience while he's out there, but he's probably not ready to play yet at this level. But good that somebody's thinking about the 2021 World Cup and giving him the chance to be in camp and train with other players and come under Wayne Bennett. Can you criticise Wayne Bennett for leaving players out, or should we go back to the essential point that we don't produce enough world-class players at the moment?
I think there's 2 points. I think the first point, in terms of the squad selection, I sort of agree with Rich and the comments made. I don't get taking 6 halfbacks. I really don't. You know, you have you'd have your starting 2, and maybe this is with Wayne, with the greatest respect, not having his handle on the game and knowing his best halfback, so he's sort of take 6 and 2 will work, and if 2 doesn't work we can trip. But really, you know, it's the pinnacle of the sport, whether it be England or Great Britain that are touring. You should know your starting halves. You know, Australia don't change the halves. New Zealand did, but because of poor performances. But if you're looking at Australia as a benchmark, they knew their 1-6-7, 1-6-7-9, and that didn't change. So I just don't get the 6 halves and 2 wingers. But then, to your point about not producing, you know, I think, I agree on that. But still, why not? You know, if you're going to take some young players, spread the selection out over not just all your eggs in one basket with the halves, take some young up and coming backs, or you're experiencing Steph. I just think it's not a very balanced squad. If you look at it on paper, it's not a balanced squad.
So the other tactical change they could have made is they could have put Johnny Lomax up to stand off where he's played most of the season, obviously been one of the standout players in Super League. Could have dropped Gareth Wood up to full-back, where he's played a lot of his career. Do we not vary enough, do you think? I mean, Wayne's argument, I think, would be, but we actually did everything right other than score the try at the end that we'd set up to score, because it's about winning and there isn't going to be a lot of difference between any of these teams. Or is he just too fixed in his ways that he won't change it? Because some of the half-backs he's picked can play in other positions. So Lomax and Wood are almost interchangeable, even though they both count as half-backs. Do we vary our tactics enough during games if things aren't happening for us?
Probably not, but you have got that experience and versatility, like you say, of that. But I think it's more of the fact that we shouldn't need to. We should pick the best players from their positions and not have to manufacture a half into a fullback or a fullback into a half. It's sort of they're playing week in and week out in the positions at the clubs, and that's what they're gaining merit on selection. So why play Johnny Lomax, who's had an amazing season? At fullback, you're not getting the best out of him. So as George Williams, I can understand taking Truman, he's an unbelievable player for 2021. If you're not going to play him, I go back to the right at the start of the show. Great Britain's a pinnacle. It's not to be. Oh well, we'll see what combination works here, and probably goes on to another discussion. It's not to get the best combinations for England in 2021. You don't forget we've got Ireland, Scotland, Wales.
This is the big debate about Great Britain. If it's going to mean something, it can't be England by another name.
I agree.
So you have to pick a Regan Grace. Not because he doesn't deserve to be there. He actually does. He's one of the... But it adds
the irony is Regan
Welshness.
Would have played.
And he'd have walked straight in next week because we're short of a winger. Do we have to acknowledge that it's the pinnacle, but also there has to be a genuine mix? So I actually thought one of the best players for Great Britain on Saturday was Joe Philbin when he came off the bench. And he is the token Irish representative. Do we need to say, look, like the Rugby Union Lions do, we'll take, if necessary, not even a party of 24, we'll take 30. But there'll be a representative of at least 3 or 4 players from each nation. Because it's a pinnacle, but it's different. Yeah,
and I think I read a column that Brian Carney wrote this week, and it was bang on, is that the players shouldn't be associated by club. It's what country they play from. So it should be Joe Philbin from Ireland, not Joe Philbin from Warrington. And I think that the brand of Great Britain and what it stands for, it's another level up from England. It shouldn't be, and I'm not suggesting that it has been, but it feels this way in my opinion, that it's a nice thing to have to add on to get ready for 2021, and you work some combos out, and
which raises another great question about what we're doing about Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Because unless we're bringing the standard of those nations up, they won't be contributing players to Great Britain. Yeah,
I think they play more internationals. They need to play more, whether it be in form of a home nations, a Six Nations, or a Five Nations, whatever it wants to be at some point. Where do you fit it? With all the fixtures.
Well, question number one is when are you going to reduce the season?
Yeah, that's I don't know, with 2021 with the Sky deal coming up and stuff like that, it's a lot of nice things that would have to fall into place. One being player welfare, so the fresher. 2 having windows where they can play meaningful matches, whether it be bring back a Yorkshire, Lancashire, whether it be a mid-season test, or again going back to that point where we're saying where are Great Britain playing in 4 years' time? Well, what's the international calendar looking like for next year? What's it looking? 2021's a World Cup. What are the fixtures for 2022? What's the plans? You don't have to put dates, venues, but what's the strategy? England playing Ireland in a home nations, but it needs sort of planning and thought out. I don't see why it can't be.
Well, and going back to the selection of heritage players, which I know is very close to your heart, it's not a one-size-fits-all, because I would make the case for the fact that Lachlan Coote is a genuine Scottish representative, because he came over paid for his own fare
While they were playing for the Cowboys.
to play in 2016 in a Four Nations because he felt that his heritage was very important to him. That, I suggest, is slightly different from a Jackson Hastings and a Blake Austin, who have pledged their commitment. I don't have a problem with heritage players. We'll Lord Tonga soon, who are all heritage players. And the fact that they are such a force now in rugby league is because two guys decided that their heritage was more important than
the paycheck of...
So, and actually that works, and there's no reason why you couldn't apply that. But do you still have a massive objection to the Blake Austin and Jackson Hastings and possibly even Coop from?
I do, and I don't. It's my opinion, and I don't know if it's a traditionalist, and I'm a bit out of touch. And remember the great sides, the Great Britain sides, watching as I grew up, and even some of the clips I'd seen of the past Great Britain sides of some of my heroes. And I just think it diminishes the brand and what it stands for, in my opinion. There's nothing personally against any Blake Austin.
Well, you'll know Blake really well.
Great lad, unbelievable player. Jackson Hastings, Man of Steel, has had a number. It's absolutely not personal, but it just doesn't sit right. My question would be, if they were good enough to play for Australia, who would they choose to play for? Do you know, if they were good enough to play for Australia, or if they were good...
Which is, to be fair, the question that's been asked of Tamalo and Fafita, who would be picked up by New Zealand or Australia tomorrow, but made a conscious decision to say, no, this means more.
But that's different, because they are good enough to play for home, their, New Zealand, or whoever that may be, and quite clearly... While they're great players, they won't be ready for or get selected for Australia. I just think it's a second best, and because they're over here and it's convenient to play for them, and it's a nice thing to do at the end of the season. And it's not a slight on either of them. It really, really isn't. But I just don't think I think our brand is more than that. If a Darryl Powell was in charge, if a Sean Wayne was in charge, I don't think he picks them. I genuinely don't. They're both, been there, done that, without, obviously putting words in their mouth. I genuinely don't think he picks them, because I think that they'd understand what Great Britain and the heritage players are.
You mentioned 2022. 2020 is 2 months away, and apparently
fixtures out tomorrow.
Yeah, but not for the internationals. Because as we know, as we told you months ago, England are playing Australia. We know this is happening. We were told this. Apparently it's going to be like a proper tour and everything. They're going to play against Toronto, which will really boil some urine in certain quarters. And Wigan. And Leeds and Saints want to play against the
Jamaica wants to play them. Jamaica Romeo was in here. France.
So back like an old kangaroo tour.
Mal Meninga has said that he's prepared to have midweek games. So to bring a big enough squad. And I think they've shown with what they called the junior kangaroos that they've got some really talented.
Absolutely, yeah.
They showed in the nines as well that wasn't the top names, but those that are second or third choice who need the experience are real high quality.
That'd be such a boost for the game.
So if you played France in midweek with your midweek team, you played a couple of club games, and actually it should be a reward for winning the grand final.
Absolutely. Or grand finalists or a Challenge Cup winner.
So that you say before the season starts, look, you win at Old Trafford, you're playing Australia.
It can give some prestige to the league this year.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, there you go. You could be the grand final winner, the Challenge Cup final winner, the League Leaders Shield, and that also gives you don't need any incentive, but what a great thing! What a great thing for the game. Not only the international game, but the Kangaroo Tour. It's iconic. If they can bring back the club games. With my commercial hat on.
Well, you can imagine midweek at Wigan or a Headingley.
It'd be brilliant. So the young players, the young aspiring, seeing their stars, as we all did when we went and watched, when the Kangaroo Tours came.
Well, you want to be there watching David Fafita, who probably isn't going to take Tyson for his L spot at the moment, but you want to be at a ground.
The other David Fafita, not the proper David.
The one you want to see. Payne Haas is virtually broken into the first 17, but if he and Fafita were playing in a midweek team,
so then
you want to see them, wouldn't you?
And to them young kids who idolise our England players, the Australian game, like we did with Fitler, Johns, Lockyer,
We never heard of these people.
but when they came, I was playing first team. I vividly remember it. I was playing first team at Leeds in 2003, and they came on that kangaroo tour, and I saw them all in the Skyrack, and I was having a beer, and I was like starstruck because I'd spent all my childhood pretty much idolising these guys, and they're on a kangaroo tour, and I was like all starstruck, and it was just amazing. So I think it's a really good opportunity for the game.
But again, we're going to have to at some point look at the length of the fixtures, because they're out tomorrow. Luke fixtures are still there. We're starting at the last week of January. We go through 3 seasons, as in meteorological seasons, which means that you can't really ever settle down, because you've got a period where it's really cold, a period where you might get a bit of sun, and then it ends in the wet.
Yes.
There's no consistency, whatever training you do in preparation for that. I don't know. We've got to decide what we want.
Yeah,
and
I think it's tough, isn't it? Because we're driven, whether people like it or not. And this is the agenda: is the priority for the game is a Sky deal in 2021. So nothing will happen, good or bad, or change until that's secure. And that's fact. That's sort of however people perceive that the main focus for the powers that be is to secure a TV deal or the Sky deal, and do whatever needs to be done to secure that.
But it's one of the things we need to do is produce a higher intensity competition.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we can still offer Sky the same number of games, but instead of having 2 on a weekend, we might have to give them 3.
Yeah.
So they can have the same overall number of matches, but if we lessen the season, let's say if we take out Luke fixtures, we get a higher intensity, better quality game.
Yeah, the product's better.
And there's also less of the fatigue of both players and spectators of seeing the same game over and over again.
Because when I was at Warrington and Wigan, Warrington and Saints is a massive game.
Well,
it's come round again.
The magic fixtures are out, which we should be extolling, but already Wigan and Warrington fans are saying, oh no, we're playing each other again. Now that's a quirk of where they both finished in the league structure, because it's done on your places.
I'm sure you've had plenty of debate.
But it's really hard to market something that you're going to get 5 times in a season.
Yeah. I agree.
And with your commercial hat on, because you've now seen it from both sides, how important is it for a club to have 14 games at home in the season? Or if they only had, let's say, 12, could they market those 12 better? Or is that a naive...
Yeah, no, I think commercially, in sort of when my role at Warrington is looking after the commercial side, take away, I wasn't bothered about player fatigue, and I was like, we need more games for the budgets, but so the more home games, obviously the more hospitality. I wasn't on the ticketing side. The more attractive it is to the sponsor in terms of you're getting 14 home games, so that is 14 times exposure. But with that, like you say, it sort of comes with, we're playing Wigan again, or we're playing Saints again, and it loses that. So it's got to decide, I think so yes, it would impact commercially, 100%, without a doubt. Some clubs could take that on the chin and go to 12 games, some clubs couldn't. But for the greater good of the game, if we're going to be bold, because now with Robert Elston in charge and the Super League in charge, and the Super League being sort of run by the clubs, if you like, with Robert headlining that and fronting that, we're sort of masters of our own destiny. So it takes all them like-minded people who know the ins and outs and commercials and how some clubs would struggle or not, to say, right, well, how are we looking for the game? Do we make an agreed sort of agenda and scheduling where we do move it to 12 games, and it's we're always going to have some opposing, but with a view of making the game as big as possible. I'm not a fan of magic. It was good at the start, different, in terms of playing at new venues. I was sort of part of the early days, and I really, really enjoyed it, but then it's just gone on. It's just another game at a different venue, and I think if we could give the players a break at that window and play an Origin or play a something, Also,
building something international, or even try nines.
Yeah, or
not necessarily at Newcastle,
No.
but if we're going to play in a Nines World Cup every 2 years,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I think we weren't as effective is because you can't expect our players to know the nuances of a game that they've never played
No.
before.
And or do something different. I think the Magic, it's not. It's they wanted it as another event and a showpiece event. The simple matter of the fact is, it's not cheap to go. You know, families to go and watch. You know, the people argue that the value of the games and the weekend is good, which it is good value in terms of what it costs. It absolutely is. But then your petrol, your stay if you want to do it. I just think, you know, there's better ways to use that Magic Weekend. Particularly
Well, there are some clubs this year that will be going to Catalan twice and Toronto once.
Yeah.
Then you're adding in Magic, then the possibility of being in the Challenge Cup final, then your playoff series, and then your grand final, all of which potential pay games. If you have a limited budget, which you're going to choose? You're going to choose the excitement of maybe going to Toronto for the first time.
I think one of the other ways around it, if you were, and it probably doesn't work because of the timing of the start of the season, because the stadiums wouldn't be available, but do round one, not as a Magic.
Which we did once, didn't we, at Cardiff?
And I played it. We played Cast, and kick off the season with a showpiece event, round one. But then you'll sort of get the, you know, so that rules out Anfield, Newcastle, the football stadiums basically. But why not do it at Headingley, or why not do it at? Trying to think of another big stadium.
But would it necessarily? Because their fixtures come out first.
Yes,
so you will be able to identify
a Friday night
or the Etihad Stadium, or
if it was on a Sunday,
or even let's go to Spurs.
Yeah.
We haven't had a rugby league event there yet. If you're having a whole weekend's game, they've got a stadium that now can.
I think because then if you're still wanting your showpiece event, Magic, but then you're taking one fixture, round of fixtures away. And then it's a real, because obviously we have the internationals, but they're overseas. You'll see on the Boxing Day games, everybody's dying to go and see the new squads, the fix of rugby, wherever that Boxing Day, New Year's Day game is. But you'd get that momentum then post Christmas, call it the last weekend in January. You were saying where if you had to kick off the season over 2 days, a la Magic.
Sid thinks the Magic may have worn off of the Magic weekend. The fixtures are on the Saturday at 3 o'clock, Castle with Catalans, Leeds versus Hull, and St Helens versus Salford in between. And on the Sunday, count the crowd as Toronto take on Huddersfield at 12:30, which is a bad time for Canadian TV as well. I don't know why. Then Wigan Warrington, and wait for the Hull on last. OKR, that is.
So would you have started with Wakefield, Hull, KR, because you guaranteed a level of support, then Toronto and Huddersfield, and then did Wigan Warrington?
But you know, we're talking about events. I was talking about this morning. If you turn it into a nines event, if you sell it as it is right now, the Magic Weekend, it's a round of fixtures, great. You get to see 3 games a day, 3 lots of 80 minutes. That's a lot of time to invest if you're a neutral in teams you don't really know much about. On a long day, the fan zone's pointless. There's nothing there, just people trying to flog you stuff.
The thing with now, and we need to understand our audience as well.
Exactly.
Because, you know, there's that many things that are accessible now for people to do. Do we understand our audience? So where we've got our absolute diehards who will go and watch every single minute of every single game. I wouldn't. I really wouldn't.
Well, we've said it before. You wouldn't sit at home and put 3 DVDs of matches on one after the other.
I just don't, you know, with that many different ways of engaging the fans or people, society.
It's really funny you should say that, because I sat down to watch the beginning of the NFL yesterday at Wembley.
Mm-hmm.
I had no dog in the fight. I can't remember the teams that were playing. But I wanted to see how, firstly, the BBC tried to engage with a sports fan but somebody who didn't have a vested interest, and how long you would want to watch it for. And 2 things struck me straight away. One is there's 85,000 people in the stadium, so you almost feel it's a big event.
Yep.
So that curiosity is peaked. Whereas we saw Saints receive the League Leaders Shield after having the most fantastic season with virtually empty stands behind them. And I think some of that is to do with the fact that we play too many games and the same teams too often. To engage the non-aficionado, the build-up was about the two quarterbacks, who both had really big stories to tell. Now again, they use language that I don't understand because I'm not into NFL, I don't know what screen defences are. But they told the stories of the quarterbacks that I wanted to see at least the first two plays of each team, just to see what the quarterbacks did. And then you suddenly find, it's quarter time. And it's only 3-0, so I'll watch a little bit more because I don't really know who's going to win. And I think that's what we've lost. We don't know what our target audience is. We know what Workington Man is.
Well, apparently, you talk about that.
Because it's Northern Industrial Working Class, the staple of the sport. But that is a diminishing crowd base, which you'll know from being at Warrington. That there isn't anybody in Warrington that doesn't know the Wolves exist. It's getting them to the games.
Because there's so many different things.
But the fact that they get 10, 12, 14,000 people from it's a town rather than a city that probably has 80,000.
No, it's a big town. It's a huge town.
But as a percentage, it's not that.
No. In comparison,
Whereas the American football sort of worked because you may never see these teams play again on home turf. They only have 8 home games. The chance to learn a little bit about some of the personalities, which we don't sell our star men enough.
Yeah.
It was a really good object lesson into learning about a new audience. Yeah. And I admit I only lasted till half time because the game is too long, and actually if you don't appreciate one of the teams you will stop watching after a while. But that was a real salutary lesson about what they've done over a number of years to cultivate 85,000 people going to Wembley. And we can't do that anymore.
And I think that's the thing in terms of society's shifting and the traditions of the older generation will always go, but it's the young generation that we need to target because there's that many different things, sort of 18 to 30 age range, is getting those in because you get the kids in and hopefully turn them into supporters, but then there's that much out there to engage young people because gone are the traditions where my dad went, so then I went, and his dad went, and it was a family tradition. The world's a different place. So until we grasp what, why, how, and how we target that, because there's lots of other different sports that people can go out drinking or socialising or.
Remember Barry Hearn?
I've heard of him.
Remember Ralph having sandwiches with Barry and Eddie? How long ago was that now? When he was on his push to become the head honcho of the Rugby Football League.
It was a while ago.
And there's one thing you can say about Barry Hearn. Very good businessman. Knows how to make money out of sport and promoting sport. We're talking about the Nines this morning on the podcast I was doing in Australia. Or an idea of what we can do to sell events, because we need events. He sells darts to people. You go to the darts, you sit in a big arena, you go to the Sheffield Arena to watch darts, Manchester Arena, you sat at the back, you can't see a thing, there's 2 blokes there, right over there. You can't see anything, you're watching on a big screen. You're paying 30 quid to do that. He can get people to do that. He's got these snooker events going on all the time that people go to pay to see. We missed an opportunity there. And as a sport, we need to get people who know how to get bums on seats.
But the other reason that the darts works and why Nines in a sense works is you're only 20 minutes away from the next game.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do go to the bar or you do go to the toilet or you're not really bothered who wins this game, your favourite might be on in the next one.
If the Magic Weekend was a double header between England and Wales and Ireland and Scotland, then you can sell to people, here's some internationals. They don't need to know any of the players involved because they don't need Rugby Union Sevens, do they? No one's famous there. They're not first team regulars. I can't even name. Owen Farrell's not playing there. There's a name. We're the best way in the world. Hello, Geordies. Come and watch some Rugby League. It's Wakefield Trinity versus Hull KR. Where's the dog in that fight? Unless one of them's wearing a kit like Widnes did, and even then.
No, you're right.
Yeah. I think, with Matchroom and the Hearns, there's no, I'm a massive fan of Eddie. I love my boxing, I love the event, and you're right, I went to, but what they do is, I've been to a couple of boxing shows, love me boxing, so I'll watch the boxing. But if you genuinely could go to the boxing a la darts, and you go for the night out because the tunes are, and that. But you look at the demographic of the audience; they're going for a night out, so it's pitch black. There's lights on in between each round, each fight, and there's a massive event. They've got the music, lights, big atmosphere, and you could do that with a showpiece nines event. But something different. I think you're right, Richie, that we probably did miss a trick. And with the greatest respect to Ralph, was either the right person in that forum to suck all that knowledge, or to how to engage him, or the busy people he ends. If we don't know where we're going or what we're going to do, if we can go, right, we're going to do a nines. This is how it runs. This is how we can build it. And the other thing, that the massive thing with Matchroom, and you know, Carl Fitzpatrick at Warrington spent some time at UFC, and he's building stories a la your quarterbacks. So we haven't got any personalities.
We don't know how to market the personalities that we've got.
Yes, you're right. That's wrong. We have got plenty of personalities, but we need to get. This is another way to get the interest, is because they're all great rugby players. They're all amazing athletes. But what's the story? And that was one thing with Warrington, and I must admit they were pushing the boundaries, and one thing from the commercial side, the marketing side, was to be different, and to try and whip up a little bit of controversy, whether it be manufactured or not, to tell the player stories, Josh Charney, tattoos, fishing, something a bit different to engage the audience. You build that up with a really good media campaign for the nines, so you do it on the Magic Weekend, and you have a run of promotional activities, and put a prize there to entice the clubs, a decent financial prize, I would suggest.
Well, that's where Hearn would get you a sponsor.
Absolutely.
But it's then, winner takes all. There's nothing for coming second.
Winner takes all, but then
and it all goes to the players. It doesn't go 100%. To the club. £100,000 winner takes all, shared between the
But
squad.
then in between the matches, breaks in play, half time, music's on, and it's a real event.
Well, you know Simon Moran, you know, just ask him to put a couple of bands on that are going to play between the semi-final and the final, and he's going to get big names. Names that people will probably want to go and see whether there was rugby on or not. But the other thing about your boxing event is that there's a headline event, but there's actually 6 or 7 bouts that you go and see as well. So again, with nines and with darts, it's constantly changing. We do have shorter attention spans, and if you don't like what's on at the moment, you don't have to wait that long for something else to come in.
You could do the Rugby League, Super League's fastest man.
Well, that's we've
Super League's goal kicking competition.
Super League's fastest lady. You could have a real big.
You could even have. I mean, we've talked about this before, so none of this is new. We're not claiming anything that hasn't already been said before. But you could identify the star player in each team, give them a slightly different coloured shirt, and if they score, you get extra points. So before the team even run out, you go, right, Blake Austin's been identified as Warrington's star man. If he scores, it's a 5-point try.
Yeah, and I think, you know...
and just it can be different.
Tell you what also as well, you could have men's and women's nines up there, because then also you're going into the women's game's been a revelation, and I think it's amazing what they're doing. But what you also get with the women's Super League, and also you get a different audience. You get a different commercial opportunities to be attached to that. You get obviously a complete different sector. So you sort of you're really having a rounded experience where you sort of can get your rugby league audience and commercial support to put on a showpiece event that would be attractive to Sky.
So you mentioned how hard it is, particularly to keep young men in the sport. There's a hell of a lot of commitment. You want to play this game. This isn't football. This isn't jumpers for goalposts. This isn't you can ring up 10 of your mates and go to Roundy Park and stick a couple of cokes down and play.
The good old days.
I'm sure some people still do, but there's a real commitment to play rugby of either code, cricket, whatever. You've got 2 young daughters. Would you encourage them to look at Women's Rugby League if there was a club near you that started an under-8s team?
I think my eldest.
Because I think it's going to be much easier to get girls to start playing the sport than it is to retain boys.
And I think the sort of groundswell of of popularity with the ladies' game, with how well the Rhinos have done. You know, the England tour. I think the equality that they quite rightly now have got in terms of pay and stuff. It's engaging for my daughter, as it is football. Seeing women's sport on TV. You know, I'm a massive golf fan. I'll watch anything on TV. And then the ladies' golf. She's actually engaged in anyone because she can relate to it. Watching rugby union or rugby league and men's football, she's not interested. But because it's a lady doing amazing sporting things, whether it be football or, there's a massive market there.
So double headers at Super League level.
Yeah.
Where you get the women's game and then you could persuade her to stay on for the men's game.
Yeah, 100%.
It's got to work.
It's got to work. It's got to work, and it's an untapped market. One for participation that's growing all the time. Warrington is probably my closest example. They had hundreds training for the tryouts, and unexpectedly at Victoria Park, they sort of didn't know. They were one of the last clubs to put on a ladies' trials and open a ladies' club, start a ladies' club, and they were blown away. So then straight away, one, for participation, two, can you convert them into fans? Can we get them in the stadium? Can they come and watch the men's? And then you know it's an audience that is growing that we need to capitalise on. But you could round that up, going back to the point of magic, of having a showpiece magic event.
I also think as well, it goes back to your comment about how important the next TV deal is, which everybody knows. If we could include a women's element in that TV
absolutely.
deal, that, you know, they've taken the grand final, viewing figures were really good, but that's the toe in the water.
Yeah.
If you were to say to them it's going to be double headers at Super League grounds,
Yeah.
there's no extra cost for you setting up your cameras, but you can have Warrington play Wigan in a women's Super League game. You can then have the Warrington Wigan men play in a Super League game.
Think
you're giving them the right number of games, but you're giving them a totally different offer.
And I think genuinely, I think it's critical.
Were you on telly when they did academy games?
Yes, they were.
Which again was fantastic for the sport.
They were, yeah.
Because it was giving young kids exposure on TV. But we all got to know who the stars were before they became stars.
Yeah. So yeah, I remember they were the good days where we used to play, and Sky used to show them midweek and film the games. But I think going with the TV deal, I think it's absolutely critical that we have a strong women's presence and game wrapped up in our game under the Super League banner. I'll tell you for why. Because if the Sky pot is the pot, but you look at how that's distributed now. But you look at the TV, so there's a dedicated golf channel, there's a dedicated Formula 1 channel, there's women's golf, they pay the rights for that, there's obviously the football on there. So in terms of giving exposure to the women's game, if you think of the pot, there's the women's football, rugby, cricket. That pot's going to get spread much more. It's going to be thinner because of the prominence of the ladies' sport in general that they're playing them. So I think it's absolutely critical. Now, you know, it's just made me think of it then, because the original pot that this TV deal sits in, that's been chipped away by supporting the women's game, because people want to see it and they're supporting it. If we have a wrapped up Super League banner, which is men's and women's, I think
and of course the problem is the women's game's administered by the RFL, and Super League is Super League, which we have to we have to get away from. We're not big enough to.
No.
It's one of our pet projects.
Sandy's excited because he's off to the Magic Weekend. Sandy, your challenges to sell more tickets to people there in Toronto again, and we'll be watching Huddersfield Giants.
Well, I think without betraying any confidences, because it's been in all the papers anyway, the opening round of Super League is going to be a double header at Headingley. So Toronto are one of their on-the-road games. They'll be playing Castleford, and after that Leeds are playing Hull. Now, perhaps you don't need to have every team involved in a big opening event, but those four give you a really big start to the season. Toronto's first. Imagine if Sonny Bill's making his debut, and I don't know if he will, but they're clearly offering him a deal that no other player's been offered before, and he is the kind of player that probably deserves it.
Absolutely, you'd get that back.
You're talking about characters and names, and players who transcend the sport that they play for. Sonny Bill signs for Toronto. People would go and watch his debut, whether they were rugby league or rugby union or just general sporting fans. So if you've got an event at and I know you and I particularly have an affinity to Headingley, but what they've done to Headingley, the way it looks at the moment, it's a Premiership football facility.
I think
so if you were to have 4 teams playing there, one of whom is making their debut, the other 3 are amongst the best supported teams in Super League, and you're kicking off the season with an event like that, that's how I think we can squeeze more value out of the sport.
Yeah.
If you have 2 or 3 of those during the season, you don't need as many fixtures.
Yeah.
Because I think you can get what you need out of. You can imagine 4 teams playing at the same venue, and let's say it was even a venue that a team wouldn't normally play at. So if you are Wakefield and you are maybe going to Nottingham, but there's 4 teams playing.
Coventry.
It becomes, you don't have to have a magic weekend. What you've got is one event
over
that weekend.
Yeah, and I think that takes a lot of sort of foresight from the clubs as well, because then it's, well, we're not getting our game money, you're not getting our, but I think it's a great way to kick off Super League. Everyone's excited to see what Toronto will bring. I think I'm really for them. I think they deserve the place.
I mean, again, I was going to ask you something with your commercial hat on. You've got the chance to promote a team that offers a whole continent to you as a commercial guy, but they're not going to bring too many fans in the stadium. What's more important to you, that you can go out to the business community that perhaps has links with another country, or you can sell it as an event that you're only going to get maybe once? It's like York did. Yeah. It's different. You don't often get a Canadian team in this part of the world. Does it excite you more as a marketing person to sell the idea of Toronto than it would necessarily a second game against Salford?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the honest answer is a nightmare with the fans with pure bums on seats, because if you're just talking books and budgets, and when you play London, Toronto, Catalan, it's a nightmare. You close a West End at Warrington in terms of pure revenue. But then I think if you look at the fact that they're going to be new in there, the marketing guys like a different spin, because it's not Salford or a Wigan, or it's something different. And I think it adds a new twist on that. I think people are being intrigued to see how they do. You throw.
Can you go to corporate partners who perhaps wouldn't necessarily support Rugby League and go, yeah, but this is Toronto?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could go to them because it's new and fresh and come and see. I think you throw in a Sonny Bill Williams, you're almost a rugby union or a rugby league fan or a Wigan fan might come and watch Toronto and Warrington for, if it's that, because, or vice versa, Warrington and go see because he is X Factor.
Yeah.
And there's not many players you can say that who'd, even can't think of many others that would. He is absolutely box office. So I think if that gig come off, you've got even another hook. But bums on seats, it's tough. It's a challenge. It's pure commercial money, but it gives a marketing spin on it. You will get your teeth into that.
I should point out, because you said Headingley is great, for all the away fans, your away stand is rubbish.
Agreed.
Last week on the programme, we referred to the greatest moment in the career of Sam Burgess, which was the time he took his shorts off and the girl that Danica knew sniffed them on TV.
That's Danica for you.
And what happened, not 24 hours later, but he's not coming to Leeds Rhinos as you thought.
Well, there we go.
What I would say is that the word coming from Australia, which was correct, that he wouldn't play NRL again.
Yes.
I thought that was quite... He wouldn't play in the NRL again, I'm thinking.
It's like when they do the retirement thing at the grand final, it's all the people coming here.
I don't know the extent of his shoulder injury, and it's clearly worse than was originally envisaged, and it may well be that he will never play again. But I wouldn't rule out, in maybe a year's time, when he's had surgery, maybe when he's had rest, that he plays in Super League. Now, I'm not saying who he would sign for. I just speculated deliberately that a club that it would have had a space in the second row next year would have been one where he was on their junior academy programme.
Yeah.
But again, you talk about names that would put bums on seats. He's another one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting, I read that, and it said, would not play in the NRL again. And I'm thinking, I think, do you know what? It'd be brilliant if he came and played in the Super League. Whoever he played for, I think, talking TV deals and talking Sonny Bill Williams, I think if he has the year out, probably he's had a fair rough year with injuries on and off the field.
He just needs to get away.
But then he can have a year resting his body. He's played at the top, the way he plays as well.
That's the thing.
He could get that shoulder. And let's whether you're Sam Burgess or myself or anyone, when you retire, it's all well and good, and you get all the lovely messages and retire. You sort of comes November the 4th today, you start pre-season, it's a lonely world, because it's something that all you've known is so. And Sam will have unlimited commercial opportunities and ambassadorial role, and he could basically do what he wanted. But he's a warrior, and he loves a competition, and maybe watch his space in that, because
I thought it was very cleverly worded that if he ever wanted to come back or was physically able to.
Where do you think he'd go?
I think Toronto would be one of the people who would be interested in him.
Well,
because I think they realise that. I mean, we've spoken about this before. That chatting to people like Brian McDermott, Brian Noble, David Argyle, the model that they're basing Toronto on is MSL soccer, and that
franchise players, big players.
Well, they felt that the whole thing, the dynamic changed. It changed in the 70s when they got people like Pele there. Mm-hmm. It changed in more modern times when David Beckham went. That if you're going to pick one player, that everybody went, well, if he's going to play in this competition, perhaps I should just take a little bit of note of what this competition is. Because they'd heard of him. They didn't know necessarily whether he was a great player or not. He'd never won a World Cup, but then with his backstory, with who he was married to, with how personable he was, that people had heard of him and wanted to see him play. And is he as good as he's cracked up to be? So I think the guys in charge of Toronto and the Wolfpack realise that they need to do something similar.
Smart.
And that's why they're making such a play for Sonny Bill, because he is a bloke that everybody's just seen play in the Rugby Union World Cup. He's still got it. He's clearly in his 30s. He's got it. You'd go and watch it. Yeah. But he's also got something else about him that he's, he will tap into a devout Muslim audience, which again is something that we don't have. So I think if you've got a rehabilitated Sam Burgess in a year's time to play alongside Sonny Bill Williams, that almost sets the Toronto franchise up. Mm-hmm. But I think if you stuck him in at any one of the existing Super League clubs,
it's very similar to when Gaz Ellis came back.
It would have a massive impact. If he did play at Wigan, if he did play at Warrington, if he was at Headingley or Hull.
Huge.
It'd be, Hull are quite rightly saying they've had a fantastic take-up of season tickets. I think they're over 8,000, which is brilliant. But you can imagine if we were waiting for the season to start and they had Sam Burgess in their ranks, that would be 12,000.
I think that's with the Sonny Bill or as well. They almost pay for themselves. So if it's an obscene amount of money. It's not obscene,
but it isn't.
But it's not. It's probably worded wrong. It's a huge amount of money in the context of
relatively speaking
in
to
the game. But you get that back in shirt sales, bums on seats, corporate partners.
Well, and Sky saying, actually, we do want to fund your sport because you've got a big story to tell now with this guy. Mm. But no.
So is that a Watches Space exclusive?
Well, it's a made-up exclusive that he is going to finish his career at Leeds. Yeah. We started that here, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, when I say we.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is there enough money in the sport? Because if you've got 2 or 3 clubs, Warrington, the classic example at the moment, they are not frightened to make a marquee signing almost before anybody else. As soon as the ruling came in,
absolutely,
it's like,
we're
going to do it.
Yeah.
And if they could have 3 or 4 or abolish the salary cap, I'm sure they'd be in the vanguard of that. Yeah. Which is really interesting, goes back to Robert Elson and what he can achieve, because I'm pretty sure Wigan would want to keep the salary cap at the moment because they're £1.4 million in debt. Mm-hmm. Warrington, who have got an owner who understands the entrepreneurial nature of the world that he works in, probably just wants to spend as much money as he can to get the best team as he can, which is an interesting dynamic as they both have a pull on Robert Elston.
Mm-hmm.
I think it suited Leeds to have a salary cap in the time where they had a load of really good youngsters like yourself coming through together, because incrementally they didn't have to spend a huge amount of money.
Yeah, 100%.
What they could promise them was they were going to have fun and success if they all stayed together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we'll talk about your time going to the Gold Coast, but I'm sure it was more an issue of a challenge rather than money.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So that I can see reasons why certain clubs would support a salary cap, but if we're really, really serious about moving the sport on, maybe the Warrington model, the Toronto model, is where we just need to be at the moment. That if there are players out there that they want to accumulate, why should we stop them?
Yeah, I think the marquee is a good
It's a sort of a halfway
house. I think, because there's the clubs, Salford, Wakefield, Cass, Hull KR can't afford the marquees and run very tight ships, but then that sort of shows that the salary cap model does work to an extent.
But isn't Salford an example of what you can do?
That's what that was my point, is that how great of model that Ian Watson and the club put all them players together on a shoestring, both on and off the field. Knew how sort of, you can see how tight they worked, and got an advance on the Super League money and all the stuff that happened at the start of the season to where they've got. So I think there's an argument there that the salary cap does actually work. Maybe not for the big ones who really want to spend, but I think there's an element for it there.
I think you've got to let Brian in.
Yeah, it's admin time. First of all, hey, Rugby League podcast, they come and go, don't they? You've noticed that. I genuinely do not know what is going to happen in the future with this programme and who sits in these chairs. I don't know.
Have we got to have a board meeting?
I think we do. The programme is what it is, as they say at the moment. If you don't like it, there are other options.
Not as many as there used to.
No. Things are interesting, aren't they? There's something else the Pep was going to mention while I'm doing the...
I noticed that you had on your screen there the news that's broken today about Bradford's financial situation.
Well, I'm going to come to that in a moment, because I've got the Nigerian results to do first, which is more important.
Because this is the other side of finance that we were talking about, is Bradford's
Echo
situation.
Trinity 28, Lagos Broncos 23, Lagos Rhinos 0, Lagos Haven 28.
They need to bring in a salary cap in there.
Haven top of the table. They've got 6 points. They've won all 3 of their matches. The Rhinos are second, but they've only played 2 games on points difference. It's got a positive points difference. It doesn't look like the men this year. So yeah, just to round up, I don't know what's going on in the future of this programme. It is, we're here every Monday, 6 o'clock.
It's safe to say that we've changed the format at the moment to give the guests more say.
Things may change in the future. They may not. I don't know. But, I always use the example of a certain radio station who comes up with a Rugby League special when there's no football on and then ignores it the rest of the time. So, I know people aren't happy.
So,
it's difficult. It is difficult. And as we've seen, it's easy to start a podcast. It's very hard to keep going. We've been doing this in various forms for 5 years now.
I had black hair when we started.
I don't want to stop doing it. So it's also interesting. I was reading, speaking of the Bulls, because we're going to come to them in a moment. Interesting that this is where the raised eyebrow bit. Why Martin Sandler got it wrong on the Bulls, says Andrew Foster, who was tweeting me a couple of times about this. The big surprise to me was Andrew Foster's a real person. But he is, and it's an interesting article he's written about things Martin Sandler said about the Bradford Bulls in the past. And let's talk about the Bradford Bulls now.
Well, you've been quite vociferous about the need for an inquiry, an independent public inquiry, because as we've said on here on many an occasion, it's not about what's happening now.
No.
It's about what's been happening for 7 or 8 years and how mistakes, which are proven in history, seem to get repeated. And one thing that has broken today is Bradford have filed their accounts late, but are £1.4 million in debt. Now, for a club that is in the Championship who are in the process at the moment of relinquishing as many players as they're trying to re-sign. Probably haven't got enough to put a team out at the moment. Where do we go with this Bradford story? So irrespective of the people who are now involved in running the club, who look very much like the previous people who ran the club, who look similar to the previous people who run the club before that, which raises questions about how we allow certain people to run clubs. You're in charge of the RFL. You're Simon Johnson, who's just been appointed as the new chair of the board of the RFL. Do you try and sweep it under the carpet, make bland statements about we've checked as much as we can check and everything's as above board as it could possibly be? Or did you say, look, we've had enough now? This is a potentially important club to the sport that's been allowed to almost be desecrated by some people who've been in charge, if that's not too strong a word, although I don't think it is. How do you stop the merry-go-round?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think it's nothing short of a disgrace what's gone on with it. I think it's an institution of a club. It was a huge club going back to long before I played, and I don't need to tell anyone the history of the club and my memories of it. I just think the only way to draw a line in the sand, because it can't get much worse, the next step is it goes extinct, because they haven't got no fixed assets, they don't play at the home ground, they don't have any facilities or anything to own. They just owe 1.4 million. Which,
to be fair to the investors that have come in, they don't have 1.4 million.
No. So why not draw a line in the sand? Because the next step it goes extinct, because unless it gets sorted out. I think for the credibility of the RFL and for the game, I think that Simon Johnson needs to support a public inquiry. I think I saw his statement, and don't know Simon, but I can say these kind of things now. I'm not in the sport. I think it's sort of just towing the same line, and there's no way that it was very sort of we've checked, and I'm not disagreeing with what he said, but it didn't come across as though it was a real thorough, proper investigation or impartial.
Well, there is going to be culpability at governing body level. It clearly wouldn't be people like him who is new to...
Absolutely, and that's what
do you have to at some point throw your hands up and say, look, even if there is some dirty linen in our cupboard that I need to get out and expose, we have to do it?
And I think it's fresh people, fresh board, and that if there's any time to do it, it's now. And it's kind of bigger than that. It needs, because while it's not, there's always going to be this, and in the world of social media, there's always going to be doubters, and I feel for the poor Bradford fans first and foremost. But it's gone beyond that, because what it's going to start doing is, I think I mentioned it on social media tomorrow, but it's getting to the point where people don't actually care, because it's just like, oh, it's happening again, and it's happening again. And it's like, well, it was a big thing when it first happened, because it's Bradford, it wasn't like Leeds or Wigan or going the same way. But the point being is, how is it allowed to be happen with the people that it's happened with over a consistent period? Where's the governance? Where are they fit and proper persons?
There's too much conflict of interest, and there always has been.
And that's probably my point with the independent inquiry and Simon Johnson. That's why it needs to be independent, because of the conflict of interest that the RFL own. It's just... If it was any other sport looking in, it's that mad.
Well, now we've got, and again, this is in no way detrimental to the integrity of Mark Sawyer, but he owns a quarter of the club that now plays at his stadium. Now, if that isn't some form of conflict of interest,
no,
I don't know what is.
And it leads itself up into then they sold the players to Hull KR, who are then going to be on dual reg to Dewsbury. It's like, and that might be all well and good and innocent,
and it might be within the bylaws of the sport.
But it's just it looks horrendous,
wrong.
And it needs.
It's the same as we've got a campaign to bring the club back to Bradford.
Well, this is where politicians are just...
we've got an election coming, and all of a sudden politicians are saying we back the campaign to... But where are they going to play?
Well, what's the point of the all-party parliamentary rugby league group if not to investigate things like
Well,
this?
they should
Or
be
is it
the
just
ones that are calling for...
Exactly.
In fact, they should be offering to undertake the independent inquiry.
Put it before a committee in Parliament like we've seen with the cricket.
I just think, one, it's sad, but then there's... I had
But you know the players as well. You know players that have been shortchanged by whatever's gone on above them.
And I can speak from experience in that when I played at Bradford and Mark Green was the owner, and my dealings with Mark, they were appalling, and I'm happy to say it. Sort of I hurt my knee and was ready for retirement, and it was I needed a knee replacement, and it was sort of coming to a compromise agreement. And sent it to the solicitors, and she said it was the most deceitful document she'd ever seen in 25 years of practice. And some of them players signed those documents and didn't get paid, and I didn't. Thankfully that I'd sent it. And it's just the characters, like he shafted a lot of people. But then the continuous mistakes. I'm not this is my experience, but I'm not suggesting Andrew Chalmers or pre or post that, because I don't know, but it seems to be that they've sucked the blood out of the club and the assets or any cash value, and when it's gone. But what they've left is just an absolute mess and a shell of a club that isn't
even playing in the city,
and it's playing in Dewsbury.
But they become Swinton next, don't they, or Rochdale or Oldham or whatever, where they have no ground. You can look at the party, they've got no assets.
I just think the worry today is that if you were buying a club that had limited, if hardly any, liabilities and could almost start again,
which it has done, hasn't it?
There's a sort of logic, but when you then see that there's a balance sheet with a debt of 1.4 million, and that's not last season, that's 2 seasons ago, and then you realise that they're now nomadic as well. You just can't turn a blind eye to it. I've got nothing but admiration for the Bradford fans that have already bought season tickets, because they didn't know that half of their team was going to be sold off when they bought them. And whilst they knew they were going to be playing at Dewsbury, they've been sold the idea that it's only going to be for a year, whereas the reality is the more you look at the available places you could play in Bradford, that can't be sold within a year. Unless somebody's going to pay an awful lot of money to bring Odsal up to standard, which isn't going to be Bradford.
No.
It's not going to be there.
No.
If they're going to build on the Richard Dudd Sports Centre site, that isn't going to happen within a year.
No.
The stadium at Horsefall isn't fit for purpose in the Championship, which is where they're going to be playing for the next couple of years, you would imagine. I don't know how they do move back to Bradford. No. So again, it's the fans that are being sold a lie. And yes, they tend to buy into that, but we know what fans are like. We always see the rosiest picture.
And my worry with it is, and it's kind of, we've made a bit of a statement, and it's kind of, the longer they leave it, it'll just go away, and we don't talk about it, and it just sort of gets swept under the carpet with time. And I was thinking about actually driving. I was driving today, and I went past the 606, and it came into mind. I thought, I've not heard much other than it was before the accounts were published this afternoon. It was this morning, and I thought it's quieting down, and that's what everyone had just wanted to do, is just quieten down, and the season starts. And
they've done that with Eamon McManus,
yeah,
who it's just been announced again today has been fined £3,000, 1,000 of it suspended for the comments that he made in the programme about refereeing. Mm-hmm. Now that was 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, just after Wembley.
Just after week after Wembley.
That it's taken over 3 months for the Catalan-Warrington deliberation to come down for the trouble that was. I think we all knew that both sides were culpable in some respects, but it took 3 months. Yeah. And you do wonder that once Bradford announce a couple more signings, once they go into pre-season training, once the fixtures come out next week, Boxing Day they might play.
And I think that's what we're most disappointed with the new board. And I think it was a real. So yes, I'm not disputing that they would have looked into it, but it's not impartial. I think there'd have been a real good support from the game to say, look, this historic club has been decimated into just a shell and a mess. What's gone on?
Well, I think somebody you know very well, Michael Carter, has been saying exactly that he's asked a lot of questions but he can't get the answers. Well, the only way you're going to get the answers, the questions he'll be asking will be exactly the right questions. I've no doubt about that whatsoever. But the only way you might ever get his answers is if we have an independent inquiry.
How would that go? So, you may know better than me. How would that come about? How would an independent inquiry come about? So we've got the all-parliamentary committee. We've got a presence in the House.
Or the RFL can appoint people who they believe to be independent, so judges or people who've got affiliations either with the game or know of the game but are not linked to any one club, that could run a commission.
So why wouldn't they?
Because they've got things to hide, the cynic would say.
No, but why,
it all comes back to that one decision, doesn't it? Why did someone at the Rugby Football League decide that purchasing the lease to Onslow Stadium was to the benefit of the
But
sport?
then also it's going to cost the clubs $200,000 a year.
Exactly.
So surely the stakeholders, like Michael Carr, can't afford a proportion of that, and so on.
But can the RFL ask Super League clubs? Because that's the other thing. Bradford are now under the auspices
But
of
my
the
point
RFL.
being
But
is-
certainly Swinton can't afford it,
No.
or Rochdale, or...
But my point being is there's enough common want and need for answers is a simple.
I also think it cleans up the sport.
Absolutely.
It shows that we are responsible. I've watched with interest, without fully understanding the mechanics of it, what's happened at Bury and very nearly happened at Bolton, because I think there are some parallels. Owners who were deemed to be fit and proper that clearly under investigation weren't, and because we are rugby league and not football, we don't get the same level of scrutiny, which in some respects is a good thing if you're trying to hide stuff, and in others isn't. So I just think if I'm the RFL at the moment and I get the opportunity at this moment in time, which doesn't stop anything that's going on at ground level to keep Bradford going,
No.
but
It's
you
the
organise
historic-
an independent inquiry into how we've got to where you go back to wherever you think the starting point was, probably 2005 if we're being honest, because when that
Absolutely.
great team started to break up,
In
you
six.
can almost trace the demise on the field, which became the demise off the field.
Yeah.
Chris Casely let his shareholding go, and it's almost from the minute that he decided that he was
It's
going
from 2006 onwards.
you have an inquiry that says we're not necessarily looking at what's happening today.
No, because you want it to flourish. There's nobody wants a Bradford side and team to succeed.
I think the whole sport does.
Of course I do.
Because whatever the rights and wrongs of what Brian McDermott said, we do need city teams.
Yes. And also, there's. I would argue that people who care about rugby league, forget you what club you support, want answers as well, because they've had experiences where they've been to Bradford and been to Oxford when it's been fun and it's been part of their DNA growing up, and to see it, people like daft, there's a reason for it to go. So people have got a genuine interest, regardless what club you support, in what the hell's gone on at that club.
I also think that if you know that there is a process that the game is prepared to go through, of which the game itself might be part victim of that process, that if it ever happened to your club, you feel as though the people that run the sport really have.
Which again goes back to my point of it. It's a perfect time with a new board, a new chair, to do it. But my question is, why wouldn't you? That's the question. Why wouldn't you sanction? If whoever could ask that question to Simon, why wouldn't you sanction or support a public inquiry?
There you go. We've thrown it out there. And I know Simon does take an interest in the programme, so if you can answer the question...
and I think...
I think we're all doing it out
we're
not doing it out of malice. We don't want Bradford to fail. We're doing it because we never want to see this happen again in the sport.
And it's nothing to... I don't know. It's nothing... I think it's just a really perfect time for the game, and with a new chair, a new board, to get some answers for the game, and more importantly for them poor fans.
So a few weeks after the election, and we'll all forget about it. Be all right. Wait for them to turn up at Bellevue next. They'll be there soon enough.
Promising the earth.
Indeed. Enough on Bradford, says Graham. You're right. The problem is we've spoken about it.
I think it's important
for 5 years
when you've got somebody in the studio who's not only playing for the club, but taken an interest in how the club's been run. It's really important to get your view rather than ours, because you can add something. And if you think that there should be a public inquiry, then I think that's a question worth asking.
Tell me, Bill, about Hugh Waddell, because I don't know anything about him.
It's an incredible story, really, and goes back to what you were saying about narrative. Sport is based on narrative, and what I would say is that I'm not a fan or supporter of rugby union, but the narrative around the South African captain, if that doesn't bring a tear to your eye when you hear him talk and what he hopes that his success can achieve, then you have a heart of stone. Well, Hugh Waddell's story isn't quite in that mould, but Hugh was dared while he was on holiday in Blackpool by some rugby union friends of his to go up to Blackpool Borough and say, can I have a trial? And he accepted the dare, had the trial, and actually was really good at the sport, and went on to play for Manly in the NRL. You know, it's pretty astonishing. Played for Oldham, moved to Leeds, played in Scotland's first ever game in the 1995 Emerging Nations World Cup. Played for Great Britain, obviously in a very famous test where everybody remembers Mike Gregory's try, but Hugh was on the field that day. And was a genuine old-fashioned prop forward. He wasn't aggressive in the sense that he didn't want to start fights. He just loved taking the ball up. Yeah. Wasn't the hardest tackler, but always put himself in position to make a tackle. And genuinely, for a frightening guy on the field when you saw him play, was really quiet and reserved off the field. I think the thing that epitomises him most is that when he got to his 40s and he played for clubs like Barrow and Workington, his professional career had come to its end, he went and helped the amateur game in Scotland, passionate about that, and he played in the first Scottish team that played in the Challenge Cup final, the Border Eagles, and that was Hugh. You know, that at the age of 40, when his body was busted and he played in one of the toughest positions, he didn't want to just give it away. He wanted to put something back. A lovely man. I think he was still in contact with quite a lot of ex-players at the clubs that he played in. I know that Leeds have got an ex-players lunch coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and I think he was earmarked to be there.
It was very sad.
But you might have seen him as a young kid, stood on the terraces. Just a great story, a wholehearted player who all his teammates absolutely loved.
Castle says
we'll miss him.
Castle says £200,000 could pay for 3 or 4 full-time development officers. Just 3 or 4?
I think you'll find it was probably 10. But
I was
yes,
going to go with 10 as well.
But absolutely.
Yeah. Of course, one of the big issues in rugby league, as we know, one thing that holds us back from international recognition is the fact that players have adverts on their backsides. Did that ever bother you, Richie, about having a load of adverts on you when you were playing?
No,
No.
Yeah, and that's I get it both ways. Certainly not when you're playing. It's just colours, and last thing you're worried about is some of the sponsors. Actually, it's interesting that with the sponsorship on the backside, it's actually it's a really valuable commercial position. So I've sold it at Warrington and fully understand why clubs are taking advantage of it. The clubs get a annual report from an independent company called Nielsen who track logos. So you submit your logos at the start of the season, whichever ones you want. Invariably it's your main sponsors and some stadium branding. And it was actually Saints who did the first ESRG on the back of the shorts, and we rolled it out at Warrington, and the coverage it gets, so the Nielsen figures track TV coverage, print, online, and trade press. So they take all that and they give you a value at the end of the season of if the company was going to buy that for that many minutes it was exposed, of what would that value be to get that media exposure. And the shorts was only slightly less than the main short because of the camera angle of it, and it was return on investment of nearly £700,000 of media value. So commercially It's slightly behind the main. It's not attractive, being on the backside, depending on who's backside. But it was a tougher sell because it's not as prestigious as it is the main shirt. But if you were looking at as a company who just weren't bothered about that, who wanted that 700 grand return on investment, it's an absolutely crucial piece in a commercial portfolio.
People think they just ask facetious questions, but I think I've broken the Facebook.
That's a great answer. I was going to ask you about your career, because one of the reasons we love having you here with extended time is that it gives us a chance to do that. And rather than start at the beginning, it's sort of the middle. So 2004, you're part of not only a special team, but a team that does something rather special. So the first time for 32 years, a club that supposedly is a big club wins the big prize. It's only for the third time in its history as well. And you make a decision a year later to try the NRL. How difficult was that? Because it must have been a hell of an offer to a young kid, the chance to play, but you've also got to weigh up what you're giving up, and it's not like you've just signed for a club. This is your club in many respects, and you've worked incredibly hard to get to where you are. You look at the full-back position at the time, that's yours for the next 10 years if you want it. What sort of process did you have to go through to decide that you wanted to play for?
Yeah, it came out of nowhere really. Obviously, I was off contract at the end of 2005. 2006, sorry. And we'd won the grand final in 4, played in the World Club Challenge in 5. And then they just announced that the Gold Coast were going to be in midway through 2005. Unbeknown to me, Michael Searle, who was a CEO and founder, the passion and the drive behind the Gold Coast franchise, John Cartwright, who was a coach, came over and watched the playoff series in 2005, the UK playoffs. They wanted to sign a outside back, a prop forward and a young English prospect. And I had a really good playoff series. I played really well. We got beat in the grand final by Bradford, but it was one of my better games that I'd played in my career. I had a really good chunk, and then I played and then I had surgery and didn't play for England. But then they got in touch then pretty much that off season, so it's a full year before, and I was like, oh my god, they came out of nowhere and got in touch with Richard Kramer, who were representing me at the time and wanted to sign me. They'd gone for Stuart Fielden as a prop, and Brian Carney, who they ended up signing. So I was like, wow, came out of nowhere. I wasn't looking to leave. It wasn't a case of going to another Super League club for more money or another opportunity. I was a Leeds boy, just won my first grand final. That was me, in my mind, that was there for life really. I never really wanted to play for anyone else. But then I thought, you know, not many people get a chance to go and play in Australia and to be part of something new. So I left it, I parked it, I was like, you know, don't really want to get me, can't really get my head around that. And then as the sort of season going on, Leeds were talking to me about a new deal, and they offered me a 4-year deal on a fair bit more money than I was on. And I was like, they just had this nagging in my mind, so I said, oh, sod it, I'm going to stay at Leeds, thank you, but no thanks. And then we had a bit of a break, and my dad lives in Spain, so I flew out. I said, I just need to go and have I went for 3 days to go and see my dad, and Leeds were putting pressure on me to sign. I said, I just need to go and see my dad. And he said, I never remember, we sat on the beachfront having a beer, and he said, look, it's your career, you do what you want to do. He said, but I just want to say that if you don't take this offer, you'll get to sort of 30, you'll get married, you'll have kids, and you'll always be a what if, because not many teams come and ask for, I was only 22 at the time, you'll never get opportunity, you might never get opportunity again, and you'll always regret it. And I went, you know what, you're right. And it wasn't a case of wanting to leave Leeds, and people say, oh, do you regret leaving? Because obviously they went on, and I really, really don't. I was fortunate enough to win with all my best pals that grand final, win a World Club Challenge, and memories for a lifetime. And I just come back, and I sort of told Tony and Gary, and I just said it's just too good an opportunity, and then sort of told them that I was going to do it. And then Michael Searle sent over, I'll never forget, a DVD of selling the Gold Coast, and played this DVD, and it was just like the beaches and the the coast and everything to do with the Gold Coast, to put this amazing package together. And then they flew us out at the end of that season. Sorry, didn't they flew us out? No. When we flew out the end of that season, so I decided to go. I had signed, and interestingly, not many people know this, Bradford were massively interested at the time as well. Steve McNamara had just taken over, and Chris McKenna had signed for Bradford, and I were really close with Chris, and they used to live at the we called it Ramsey Street. They all lived together at Edinley. And he said, Steve McNamara wants to talk to you. He wants to sign you. And I was like, no, I've agreed to go to the Gold Coast. And my dad said, well, go and listen to what he has to say. So I had a cup of tea with Steve McNamara in Chris McKenna's house, and he offered me 3 times more than Leeds offered me. Remember, the second highest paid player at Bradford, for a 5-year deal. And we're never going to sign. I'm never, league lad. But I thought we wanted to. And I wanted to see what I was worth, but I said, look, let me think about it, and I'd given my decision at the time for the Gold Coast. It had probably been twice as much as it had been on it. It would have been a fortune looking back now. But that's the point, it wasn't about the money, it was about to go and experience the Gold Coast, and so glad I did it. It didn't work out. The Leeds were announcing that I was leaving, and Gold Coast were announcing that I was signed on the Monday. I'll never forget it. And we were playing Hull at Headingley on the Friday and did my cruciate. Saltlaw, of course I did my left cruciate, and then obviously went over with the injury. And I'm really proud of this bit, because I went over with me. No one knew I was like a rookie, even though I'd sort of won stuff with Leeds. Got over with this injury, and it's a ruthless. There were loads of players, and it's a national sport, as we know. There were 10 of me. You were easily disposable. But I got back fit and played 6 games for Burley in the centre and standoff, and played really well for Burley. And then Preston Campbell got injured, and then I made my debut against St George at Wollongong and played 8 games. But then I was just getting back right, and so I'd done my left one, played 8 games, and did my right one at Campbelltown. Leichhardt, sorry.
So did the DVD that they sent you include Billy Moore?
Billy Johnston.
Billy Johnston. Had it have done.
Well, it's a funny story that. Because
he's ruthless.
Ruthless. So Billy Johnston, for people who won't know, he was the Australian conditioner, Australian and Queensland fitness coach, and he was a maniac. I kept a diary from the 1st of November when I got there right through till I left. There's some of the things we used to do.
Makes Martin Clausen look like a puppy.
Absolutely. And there's an interesting story. So when I'd signed, went for Ali Lawatiti, agreed the terms to take him back to the NRL. Genuinely, he found out that Billy Johnson was a conditioner and stayed at Leeds. That's a true story. Michael Searle were laughing about that. He said, no, that's absolutely not for me. Just a maniac, great guy. But you can see why they'd have the edge. Obviously, they've got the facilities. And what I quickly found out over there was it was survival of the fittest, genuinely, because everyone was telling it. There were literally 20 of me. You come and go. There were maybe, 5 or 6 for all the really, really good players. 20 of me were just all right. But it was the survival of the fittest. The training was intense. The hours were long. And they just had that many numbers that they just pushed you literally till you broke, and then they got the top. It was the fittest I'd ever been.
In terms of your career, having had the privilege of watching you from when you first started, played for England schoolboys as a standoff, but never really in your professional career, apart from the odd game maybe filling in or during a game, never really started as a standoff. You would have been a great standoff at a time when this game didn't have a lot of British halfbacks.
Yeah, problem being that I had someone called Danny Maguire in front of me.
But even if it wasn't at Leeds, when you've gone to other clubs, I just think we missed an opportunity not playing you at standoff.
I kind of realised early doors. I played standoff all the way through, really, and I played for England schoolboys and
beat the Aussies.
And we beat the Aussies, the first team to ever beat the Aussies. What a team that was, by the way, to beat the Aussies.
Well, you had Gareth Hock in front of you, just stood behind him.
Gaz Hock and Ryan Bailey just knocked 10 bells out of their pack. They were frightened to death of them two. But we had a really good side, and Mike Gregory and Dennis Betts were the coaches, and it just a magical time in 2002. But it goes back earlier than that. So when we were playing, because I always played a year above Danny. Danny's a year older than me, but I always played standoff, and I always played. I quickly realised you're going to have to think of another position here, because if you want to play for England and Yorkshire and Leeds above, he's the number 6. So that's, I'm thinking, well, where else can I play? And then that's when I started playing fullback.
How important in your career has Tony Smith been? Because he sort of gave that group of kids that were desperate to win the tools to win.
Absolutely, yeah.
But also he almost resurrected your career by bringing you to Warrington, and the success that you had at Warrington. Could you have envisaged that when he brought you back?
No.
Because that was another magical time.
It was after, so I did 2 cruise ships in 16 months, and then so Tony, to round the story up. So I came back from Australia. I knew I had a 2-year contract, but I were damaged goods. I was, had 2 ACLs in 16 months. Were no good for nobody. And then Wigan came calling, and Brian Noble, best salesman there ever is, no bit. But I went and played for Wigan, and I get loads of stick on social media, and I were awful for Wigan. I genuinely, I would literally come back from 2 ACLs. I was frightened to death to do anything. Step in, and I was just fragile. But then going and playing for a club of that stature with them fans who'd been used to that success. And bless Nobby, I was kind of like kept playing me week in and week out, and the more I played, the worse I got, and there were no one more aware of it than me. And it was a real tough time. I was thinking, my career's gone. I was up there, sort of thinking, I'd achieved all that early doors, and I'd had 2 cruise ships, and that's, out of my career, I'm more proud of probably the back end of my career after coming back from them 2 cruise ships than any other time, because I managed to kick on and have played probably another 8 years. But I was awful for Wigan, and then I'll never forget it, Tony Smith rang me. We're having a barbecue at my brother-in-law's, and he said, we're selling Martin Gleeson to Wigan. I can get you a part of it, but you need to I said, just get it done. Didn't even talk anything, just get it done. And then he absolutely gave me a chance when not many, my next move was absolutely downwards after Wigan, because I were awful. But went to Wigan, he said, you'll be right. Went to Warrington, you'll be fine, because I knew how he worked, and I knew what he expected of me, and he sort of knew how to push my buttons. And then I went and sort of got really fit and trained really hard, and then sort of won.
And it was a team that was starting to get on the up as well.
Well, that's it. We were a team of superstars with a club with Simon Moran as the owner, and a rock star team and Perception. They partied hard. They were a good team, but never consistently good. They had as good a time off the field as they did on it. That was the perception and the reality. And my first week, I went there and they got beat on the weekend, on the Sunday, and it was a Monday. Never ever forget this. And it played the video for about 2 or 3 minutes and turned the video off. He said, we're not watching that. And he said, right, I want to put something to you boys. This is, bearing in mind he'd only been in the job 2 or 3 weeks himself. He said, I'm not having that anymore. He said, I've spoken to Simon this morning, and this club is going to have success with me in charge, whether you guys are here or not. This club's going to be a successful club. So anybody who doesn't want to be part of that, anyone who's going to toe the line and commit to that, I spoke to Simon. You just need to leave now, ring him, and he'll sign your release forms. Come to some agreement. Any single one of you can leave now. And you can see there's Morley, Breers, Monaghan, King, there's a team full of absolute superstars. And then he just stood back. So if we're quiet for 10 seconds, it's awkward, isn't it? For a good 2 minutes, he just stood, and he's the master of mind games. Right then. And he said, right, well, from now on, it's this way. And then we just went on this magical run. We were off in the league, but then went and did back-to-back at Wembley, which are just, again, special times.
I'm just looking at your career on Wikipedia. 2 big paragraphs on Leeds, 1 big paragraph on Gold Coast, a paragraph and a half on Wigan, paragraph on Warrington, paragraph at Castlewood, 2 lines on, 1 sentence on Wakefield. Richie joined Wakefield Trinity Wildcats for the 2012 season.
Do you know what? Them 3 years at Wakefield were as enjoyable 3 years I had in my career. I enjoyed them 3 years at Wakey.
Is that team spirit?
Yeah, it were brilliant. It was brilliant.
Because we've talked a lot on this programme about culture, because we've not played clearly. And nobody can really define culture. No. Was that was as close to it as you can get?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I played in teams what won, and Tony Smith had a really good culture and demanded a good culture, and we were all young and impressionable at Leeds. They were really different at Wakefield, because you didn't know if you were getting paid or not. Genuinely.
I shouldn't laugh, but at least things have got better.
No, absolutely. Michael's done a great job. But back then, when Andrew Glover was in charge, you didn't know if you were going to be paid or not. Rich Agar had taken over, and then we're just putting he literally played Moneyball. There were new players coming in every single week, and but what we knew what we were, and I was chatting to Lee Smith about it on my way on travelling today. We were talking about reminiscing about Leeds, but we knew we were sort of teams. We were players that were out of favour at some clubs, who were a little bit past it for the top at other clubs, who were young and needed a chance, but were a real mix and match of odds and sods. But Rich put us all together. We had an unbelievable way of playing. We knew on our day we could attack as good as anyone. As a defence was a bit leaky, but we could always outscore pretty much anyone. But we cultivated a really good team spirit from Rich and the rugby department, because it was that bonkers off it. You couldn't do anything else. But we had such a good laugh every single day. One of the big things that drove that was Rich. Rich was a brilliant coach, and he was massive on ownership of the group and culture. So he brought a guy called Merv in from Australia, a guy who runs a thing called Leading Teams. Mad, obviously I was at the back end of my career, to build this culture. So we were a new side brought together, and I think he'd had him at Hull as well, and it were about your own standards, and what do you adhere to, what will you accept, what you won't accept, and criticism and self-policing. It all sounds really fancy, but when it were in practice, it were absolutely brilliant, and a lot of the standards that were driven were self-policed. So we committed to certain behaviours, and we knew what we were as a team. We weren't at Leeds, Wigan, Warrington, but we knew if we hit these markers week in and week out, or if we did hit these markers, we knew 14 out of the 17 had to hit these markers. They weren't based on stats. They were based on being ruthless, being honest, and I can't remember what the other one, too many bangs to the head. But we judged each other. So the coaches did their scores, the players did their individual scores, and then the leadership group did each player's scores. And it was like a system I'd never seen before, never seen since, but it worked because it made everybody accountable. And it was, we had the spirit was, it was harsh. Rich was a tough coach, but it was never personal, so it could be really cutting, but it was for the bigger thing. So it's not because I don't like you, it's because it's not to the standards what we need to be at. So it's not personal. So you had to give you ways of accepting the criticism and not thinking anything. It was for the greater good, and they did a fabulous job. I really, really look back on them 3 years at work. I love going back. The testament is that we all still speak to each other, and Michael, since he's taken over, has done a fabulous job with it.
In terms of Richard, sorry to keep jumping.
No, it's okay.
You've got anything on social media?
I've got something to say, but I'll tell you in a few minutes. It's really important in a minute.
Richard, again, is a figure that perhaps those that have never played for him don't understand. Mm-hmm. He's been at two clubs where expectations exceeded genuine reality. But now he's got the chance at Leeds, which he said he couldn't turn down. There's already some fans on from the outside looking in going, is he the right man? Would you say he was? You know him as well as anybody.
Yeah, no, he absolutely. There's no bigger fan of Rich Agar than me. We ended up sort of from a player-coach relationship. He taught me things, bearing in mind that I was sort of back end of my career when I went there. He taught me things I never ever knew about the game, of ways to play, why and what for. And there's no bigger rugby nerd than me, and watch games and study things, and came through a really well coached system in Tony Smith and principles But he taught me things I'd never ever known. And to teach an old dog new tricks, and he was just so engaging in that sense. There's no bigger student of the game than Richard Agar. He's an absolute anorak of rugby league knowledge, and he loves it. And I think I think it's a perfect time for him, and I think it's his defining moment, if that's a good way to put it, because he's unheralded. He's not a I can see why he wouldn't be a popular choice on the face of it, but that's sort of cosmetic, because he doesn't like he's very good. He's very articulate, but he don't play the game. He just likes to. He's in his best environment when he's in his tracksuit or behind his laptop, plotting, coaching. And I think the combination of and the dynamic of Kevin Sinfield as a director of rugby, dealing with the agents, dealing with the press, and as a statesman-like figure, Rich will be more than happy. And they've got a really good working relationship and understanding that Kev can do all that and just let Rich do the coaching, and yeah, I think it's a great appointment. As you know, but then you look at the coach who's gone past. Nobody knew who Tony Smith was. They're like, who's Tony Smith? No one. So Darryl Powell come with some scepticism, from player to coach. You go a bit further. No one knew who Graham Murray was when he took over. No one knew really who Brian McClellan was. Brian McDermott was coach.
Certainly untested when he came to
and coach at London, who were awful. So, other than going and getting Craig Bellamy and you signing a marquee coach, if you like, there's a pattern. And he knows, he's got a good relationship with Gary and known them for a long time. I genuinely think it's the perfect signing.
Partly it's probably become too self-righteous in the last few weeks, which is interesting.
Okay.
But you know what, people? I tell you what. I say people are idiots. What I'll say is, if you don't know anything about politics, don't talk about politics, because you'll be made to look an idiot on the internet. Professor Tony Collins' excellent article in The Guardian last week, which people took the wrong way because they didn't read what he was saying, was a brilliant piece, because it's all about working to man. They're coming for us. They're coming for you, for your votes in the upcoming general election. We are the important people, and the women as well. Apparently they're going to vote these days. I'm sure some government probably preferred if they didn't.
But apparently we're all going to change the way that we voted. Although we're probably not. Because history says
vote however
we
you
are the
want.
renegades.
Just vote.
Make sure you vote.
Also, what's come through on the email right now, strictly embargoed until 9 a.m. Tuesday 5th of November. They're trusting, aren't they? Betfred Super League 2020 fixtures got them here. Some interesting changes to the season. I don't know what we know and what we don't know. Do we know about Easter? Has that been officially announced?
Has that
Possibly.
You've just announced
Possibly.
it.
I don't know. I'm not telling you that.
Allegedly.
No, but I'm not telling you they're playing. So that's all right.
No.
You'll find out at 9 o'clock in the morning anyway.
I'm sure there'll be a very good social media campaign that will release the opening fixtures.
It's all about player welfare and so on and so forth.
Which makes sense, because again, we've spoken about Easter from a spectating point of view, but you can definitively talk about the effect that it has on players. But you can't really have an HIA assessment that stands players down and then expect them to play twice in 4 days as part of your regular season. There's a huge
discrepancy. There is, and it's not. We kind of, you toe the line that, Easter's Easter, and you just got to get on with it.
Tradition.
It's tradition, but it's not acceptable, I don't think. And I get it. I get it. Again, I'm a rugby, but it's not acceptable to put players through it, because it car crash. It is absolutely car crash. Not only that, it's not just you actually not that. So you play a Good Friday.
Presume you don't do anything than sit in ice for 2 days.
No, you can't do anything. You literally can't do anything.
But then you play again Monday before the bruising is probably fully come
and that's
out
the thing.
It, right?
So you feel awful, and it's not just the bumps and bruises, but you're tired. You can imagine, can't you? You don't have to exaggerate. You're absolutely shattered. But then you get to Monday, and it's not that bad. History suggests the Monday game's it's a much slower game. It's not as intense. It's a token fixture, if we're being honest. the problem I've got with it is not just that. You're feeling the effects of that for week after week after week after. So they might say, well, the injury stats say that over Easter, Friday, Monday, they were down by 55%, but there's no stat to say in 3 weeks' time what it is, and the knock-on effect. And the problem being with the squads, the teams with the smaller squads are goosed.
Yeah.
So if it is one fixture, brilliant.
It might be. By the time you watch this video tomorrow morning at 9, then you'll know what the answer is, and I'll put the fixtures at the bottom of the screen. Only the Easter ones. I'm not typing all out. Every single round of fixtures, especially when everyone else is going to do it anyway. You know, we've done the whole programme and we haven't spoken about Tonga. Because they are the story of the week. Well, to most media organisations, again, people latched onto a tweet of mine this week.
But again, I think that's more to do with the status of the sport rather than the status of Tonga.
The Tongan Invitational 13, and I can tell you, this is just from our YouTube numbers, my analysis of them. Our videos get what they get, the ones we put out every week. The post-match press conferences that John Davidson sent over, can we send him back?
I'd like to.
Between them, I've got about 20,000 views, which is a ridiculously high number for a post-match press conference, which is done on John's phone and I've edited to look even worse. Because people want to hear from Jason Tamalolo, the new king of Tonga, and Kristen Wolfe and Mal Meninga, and not too much from Boyd Corner, but there you go. People like international rugby, and this is exciting because for the first time in a long time, someone who isn't England, Great Britain, New Zealand and Australia are getting all the headlines. And
it's amazing. It's a great story, and you see one. They beat 2 full-strength sides, so it's not they were weak. And I think the sub-story of them not playing for their for New Zealand but playing for the country of heritage, I think it's really refreshing. I think the riches in the Australian game to play state of origin, to play for Australia, are enormous. I mean, the play like a full year salary of a Super League player just to play representative. That's the money that we're talking that they've foregone to play with that band of brothers. And you can see that what it meant. It's a something. They've got the culture. They've got the team spirit. It's a real shot in the arm for the international game. And you see the celebrations, a la a World Cup win in soccer, where the fireworks were in the streets of Auckland and the cars and the flags. And do you know what? I was thinking, what a great story. It's brilliant. And I love the way they play. They're big, they're fast, they're aggressive. Is there an argument to, the people have been talking, would they become a tier 1 nation?
They should. Well, I think the draw for the World Cup is at the end of this month. There's going to be 4 pools of 4. It's now been decided that Tonga will head a pool, so they effectively are a tier 1 nation. I think the most important thing is that they managed to cure the one thing that they lack. They've always been big. I mean, the centres are ridiculously big. But what they've never had is that link between forwards and backs. Tuilola here is...
brilliant.
Red shirt, he's a different player.
He's been absolute... But I think to just pick Tony Staggs, who, as far as I know, is not a halfback, and put him in there because he's got the skills, and to play the way they did against Australia, it's not about even who they are. They'll do anything for that group. And I think that comes across, and you almost felt that, like what happened in the World Cup, after 60, 65 minutes, because of their size, they would implode. But they're not anymore.
Because they're all playing top level first grade.
And it's just a joy. Stats can say whatever you want, but Australia haven't lost to a nation other than New Zealand or England / Great Britain since, was it 1951? Which was the first time France beat them.
Amazing.
Australia haven't lost to anybody other than a tier 1 nation since 1978, and that's when, again, they were in France on tour. This is massive. And because it happened at the same time as the Rugby Union World Cup, understandably, that's a World Cup final. It didn't get probably the prominence it deserves. But we should all tip our hats to Tonga. I think Tamalolo and Fafita should be immortalised, because if they hadn't, I mean, people like Fusitua as well immediately agreed to go along with them. If that group hadn't turned around and said, look, it means more to us to represent our homeland than it does to to take the money. I mean, Taumalola can do that because he was the first $1 million player, but he didn't have to do that. It needs somebody to take that first step for everybody else to. But you can see it's what it means to them. I thought there were parallels between the South African Rugby Union team and the Tongan Rugby League team. That when they won, they were talking about what it can bring to their people back home, the unity and the hope, and that kids now hopefully will look at this group of people and want to be like them. But it's what we as a sport can do in the Pacific. Because I think Samoa are just starting to see players drift away from New Zealand and possibly Australia, and they're going to get stronger. Fiji beat Samoa on the undercard and have been to the last 3 World Cup finals. Look to me like a nation that are ready to take that next level. And we've seen how good people like Kevin Aguama are over here. I just think if we can get 6 or 7 genuine nations, and if the next time we started by talking about Great Britain, where are they going to go, say, in 2022 or 23? Well, what if they have a game in Fiji? If they have a game in Tonga? If they have a game, in
There's no reason
Samoa?
why they can't, can there?
What would that do for international rugby league?
I think it'd be pioneering, and I think because we're always we pride ourselves on being different and trying new things as a game, and I think one is an experience for the players to go and play there. The world's a much more accessible place.
They've now got stadia that would be defined as being of a standard.
So I think a real Oceania tour where they played in them nations. And who knows, like 2021 World Cup, it's not just your sort of big three.
You would now pay money to go and watch Tonga.
Yeah.
If that Tongan team that performed the way they did over the last 2 weeks are coming here, and we've got the chance to go and see them in 100%. Our backyard, I want to pay to see them. Yeah. I want to go and see Jason Taumalola put on that ring. I want to hear the Sippy Town.
Because you can, and I think that's the engaging thing, not just how special the brand of rugby they play and the athletes, but it means so much to that group of players. That's the other hook and engaging.
The 2 players that got, I mean, they all got rave reviews, but the 2 that were picked out, because again, I think the expectation is if you play at Super League, it's a lower level. Ben Murdoch-Masila, who now apparently NRL clubs are chasing, and Conrad Hurrell, both were at a level that they haven't played week in, week out in Super League, because it clearly meant so much to them. Isn't that what international sport is supposed to do?
Conrad Hurrell's post-match interview was in tears. And that's the pinnacle. That is his pinnacle. That's what it means to, and that's what it should mean to whichever nation or nations that you're playing as a group collective. That is the absolute pinnacle, and that's what it should mean to you. It would have, if I'd have been good enough and had the opportunity to play for Great Britain. I remember, if you can imagine walking in at the time of playing with Andy Farrell and Chris Rodlinski, or players that you've absolutely grew up idolising. That's the pinnacle. So. Really good for Tonga. It just adds to the anticipation. I can't, probably skip it a couple of years, but the 2021 World Cup's going to be amazing.
And which we must pay tribute to Scotland, Ireland and Italy, who've already qualified. And Greece and Serbia get to play off next week. Another new nation will be in the World Cup. Then we've got America and the Cook Islands for the final 16th place. This time of year, all we've really got to talk about is International Rugby League, but we need to make this priority. I think everything we've said tonight is starting with Great Britain right through to Tonga and how much we're looking forward to the 2021 World Cup, how perhaps we need to readjust the season. International Rugby League has to be given its priority.
It's imperative. It's imperative for the game to move forward.
Especially when the NRL, because of the money, because of the prestige, because of the status in Australia, is a great destination for many of these South Sea Islanders who perhaps would have in the past gone and played the other code.
I think there's a change in the NRL.
Kill off.
Well, if that is a collateral damage, then I'll accept that.
I mean, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself.
You are, but I think what we can say is there's been a change in the Australian Rugby League Commission. The chairman there has moved from Peter Beattie to a gentleman called Velandis, who's come from horse racing, and he seems to be talking expansion. Mm-hmm. Now, if he's talking expansion, we've got Toronto in Super League. I think now is a really good time to change the agenda of Rugby League. You'll never get a blank sheet of paper, But what you might get is the two hemispheres looking in a similar sort of direction rather than apart from each other. And we could be on the cusp of something really important, especially with that television deal, Jim. That, you know, international rugby league is vital that we see it on terrestrial television. But if we can get more international properties, it was almost perfect on Saturday that Great Britain were on the BBC and then Tonga were on Sky.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can come up with some kind of a deal that services all of those television partners, but International Rugby League is also part of the negotiations, we could do something.
Yeah.
A bit taken aback by Featherston's away shirt, grey and purple. Looks quite nice. Not sure about that Leeds shirt.
Will Brett Ferries look good in it?
It's not got hoops on, so yes. No, it's got one.
What, you don't like the Leeds shirt? Very similar to 2009.
Yeah, no, I'm not really bothered. I'm not going to buy it, am I?
No.
I don't know why.
I thought this was a new design for a Wakefield away shirt.
This was next. I don't know why have Hull gone for the Barbarians kit for their principal jersey in 2020.
We can now get the Magic kits, can't we? Now we've announced the fixtures.
I was at the Ice Hockey last week. £5 tickets. It's brilliant. They've got a kit. They had a kit for Halloween, special kit for Halloween. They've got the home shirt, the away shirt, cup shirt.
Who's this?
Sheffield Steelers the other week. They've got a kit coming out next week for Remembrance Sunday. That's 5 kits and the season's only just a couple of months old. 60 quid a pop. 60 quid a pop. Covered in sponsors. It's the future.
Just not on the backside.
No. Oh, looking closely enough. I think we're done, haven't we?
We've got to go on 8 o'clock.
Unless I've missed any topic that we're supposed to talk about.
It's absolutely flown.
Anything on social media that wants answering while Richard's here?
No, I think people are saying get Darryl Clark on from the start. People are excited about the fixtures. Tony Collins is awesome, says Michael. He is.
He is.
Who's last one? Who's going to win Super League?
Well, I said London, didn't I, months ago? So
they haven't finished recruiting yet, have they?
No. A bit premature.
I don't think Saints are going to be any weaker. And I think what we've seen...
They've got the super coach.
I was going to say, what we've seen with Tonga, Christian Wolf probably is going to have an impact there as well. So I think you'd have to start there. But who knows how...
Who knows?
Gareth Woodop and Blake Oskin are going to combine at once.
It's exciting for them to play in Super League. If
the fact that Hull have got a pack that everybody will be fearful of. There's some beasts in there. What we don't want to do is predict at this stage who's going to win it.
Well, I said Wigan 2 months ago, so I've got to stick with Wigan.
Well, again, Jackson Hastings and George Burgess are not exactly going to make them weaker.
Oh, Sheila's been on. Not as wire. Sick of saying it's our year. So there you go.
Well, don't say it's your year, and it might be your year.
Not my year. Might be.
And I think Leeds have probably got a couple of big signings still to come as well.
Trent Merrin's back. I saw him in the back of a coach.
Trent Merrin's back.
Van. So
it's good man.
If he needs any tyres from his van, we know where to go.
If you need tyres, this is you. Provided you've got a commercial lead.
big truck.
On that bombshell. Richard, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Hopefully you'll come back.
We'll be back next week.
Put you off.
We'll be back here next week. You can't get rid of us. I keep thinking, we'll just give up and we'll quit and whatever. But can't do it because we've been doing it for 5 years and everyone else has gone by the wayside and we're still here.
And we love it.
Yeah. I'm just going to go and make up some Twitter accounts to get us some more followers. But until next week, go ready to the road or something, and we'll see you on the outside.